Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. Today, we have a show in our Help Situation Spotlight series. This, of course, is our series where you, everybody that's in our community, contributes and shares and asks questions and lets me know what's on your mind. And that's how we decide the topics. So the topic for today's show, for this episode, is how do I handle, survive, or tolerate a difficult or abusive boss? How do I handle, survive, or tolerate a difficult or abusive boss? Now, this is an interesting show for a couple of reasons. One, this is a question that's come up over, the last 14 years a lot as I've been out doing corporate education programs and seminars and keynote speeches and things of that nature. It's also something, though, that prior to that, when I was practicing law for full time and taking a lot of employment cases, people had, very serious legal issues, and they'd hire me to represent them in regards to those employment issues. I also did represent some employers, organizations, who needed my assistance with their employment legal issues. So I've seen and handled these types of issues for quite a while relative to the length of my professional life. And I've recently, when I was putting together this program, I thought, well, recently we've done some shows similar to this. But as I was looking over those other show notes, I realized, no, we really haven't. There was a show, a 3-part episode that we did as part of our Help Situation Spotlight series, and that was, how do I respond to insults and intimidation at work? So we were talking about how someone responds to intimidation and insults at work, and we were trying to discern, what are some of these techniques? First of all, am I really being attacked? Is this really a direct verbal insult or attack? And we talked about how to figure out when it is or when it isn't. We also talked about the fact that there's a little teeny tiny minuscule population of entities, people around the world who are emotional and psychological predators. And their goal, their mission, is to get out and inflict pain on other people. And so if you do have one of these very rare situations where you have to engage in some of your mental self-defense arts, right? We talked about that in that 3-episode program. That when you really are facing someone whose intent, their goal, is to inflict pain, emotional pain, psychological pain, then you have to face that reality, and you need to have engaged in a self-defense program and have a process in place to react, just like you would take a physical safety self-defense class, so that you're prepared, even though hopefully it never happens, right? But, oh my goodness, here's someone, they're trying to rob me or take my belongings, and now I have my self-defense training, and it kicks in. And so that's why we do that. These are all proactive, just pragmatic tools, hopefully we never need to use. But in that series, we did focus. What do? Self-defense and your mental self-defense arts. And a lot of it was from the perspective of it's a peer, maybe it's a third party like a client or a vendor. How do you deal with that? And we walked through the concept of once you've ascertained that this really is a predator. So this isn't something, that you're misinterpreting. It isn't something where maybe somebody just has a different personality than you do. It's really a predator. And this is a direct, intentional attack. Then we went through in detail, obviously, but big picture, the fact that when someone's trying to inflict pain, then what they want is to see that it's working, like anything else, right? Like if my goal is to inflict pain, I want to see that I'm inflicting pain. That keeps me going. It pumps me up. The challenge then for us when we're using our mental self-defense arts is that we're not going to give them what they want, right? We're not going to manifest any evidence that, oh, it's working. You're inflicting pain on me. So we talked about using our professional face. That's our body language, where we have a very relaxed physical facial expression. So our muscles are relaxed around our eyes, around our mouth, around our brow. We keep sort of an open, because our muscles are relaxed, our expression tends to be open, not judgmental. You have to practice all of this. But when we use this, so someone comes, they're an emotional predator, they're coming, their goal is to inflict pain. Here they are. Oh no, they're trying to inflict pain right there. And what am I going to do? I will deny them. I will deny them what they want. So I'm using my professional face, relaxed muscles, and they will not be able to be certain that they're inflicting pain because there's not a reaction that they want. They need evidence that it's working, and I'm not going to give them that evidence. In my facial expression, in my voice, in my eye contact, it's not happening. And I'm using that, and we talked about in that 3-episode show, because typically this is, a peer, it's someone who's some sort of other entity in the workplace, and I'm going to teach them that I am not the victim. By withholding, denying them the facial expressions, the tears, the crocodile tears, the trembling voice. Oh, what do you mean by that? When you say I'm an idiot, I mean, by denying them all of these signs and cues that, hey, I'm an awesome victim. It is working. You are inflicting incredible pain. When you deny them that, you just show them that this is a harder and more difficult victim than they probably want. And so hopefully very quickly they learn that they're not going to get what they want out of you, so they just don't try to attack you any longer. Hopefully you're in an environment where this can be addressed so that they are unable to attack anyone in the future. Protecting yourself is, of course, the first line of defense, but ideally we want to stop them from doing this to anybody, if we can. And a lot of those tools and techniques and things that we discussed in that episode, they are going to be part of the solution in this show. Part of the solution in dealing with your, boss who's difficult or abusive. Your boss may be intimidating, insulting. They might even be dangerous, unstable. They may have an undiagnosed and untreated mental health or psychological issue, and that's part of what's causing the behavior. But no matter what their core cause is, you have to immediately take control of the situation and stop them from the cycle of repetitive action. And the repetitive action, of course, is when they get the good consequence they want. So if their goal is inflict pain and they get a good consequence, you're crying, your eyes are tearing up, your muscles are tightened in your face and in your fists, and your whole body is tense, and you're manifesting in everything you do, even your breath, right? Your breath is, you're showing and telling them, hey, it's working. You are winning. You're getting you're inflicting pain. I feel pain. So we're going to deny them that, and that's going to short circuit the reward system, and it's going to have them then, of course, seek out a different victim, but hopefully, again, that we've got the structural support so that we stop them from any victim is the goal. But we have to immediately in that moment defend ourselves. So a lot of that does apply in our situation here with our difficult boss. I do want to also address the other shows that initially I thought, well, haven't we already addressed this recently? We did a program in our management magicians, and that's where we're talking to and about our managers who are really doing, fantastic work. They're above and beyond what they could do or even should do. They get amazing results in terms of the organization, in terms of their individual career, in terms of their the people that report to them. I mean, these are just fantastic managers. That's why we refer to them as magicians. It's almost like magic what they can get done. And when we talked about that, when we talk about managers and a lot of the HR or HR heroes that we do shows on, it's a different framework, because if you have a situation with someone who's abusive, who's insulting, intimidating, dangerous, and you're their supervisor or you're a supervisor or human resources and/or human resources, then the answer is really simple, right? So whatever it is that they're doing. So sometimes when we do corporate education, people use euphemisms, which is fine. And a lot of times people refer to, I've got a difficult people or difficult person. How do I handle that? Well, it's really easy. Difficult in the context of a human resources or a manager or leader should be just a euphemism for you have someone whose behavior has deviated from what is acceptable or what is legal. So if you have a situation where you're the manager and oh my goodness, I've got a difficult person, and then I always probe when I'm working with either a consulting or an on-site corporate education, corporate training they used to call it, program, and I'd say, okay, well tell me what you mean by that. What does it mean that they're difficult? And what I should hear is, oh, well, every single time that we're in a meeting, and another team member starts to say something, they will immediately interrupt, and they'll say things like, absolutely not, you're an idiot, I can't believe that you're always coming up with these stupid ideas. Okay, that is a behavior that people sort of use the euphemism difficult, but what it means is that's inappropriate. Sometimes you have someone who has engaged in some behavior that is so inappropriate that it's immediate grounds for the most severe action possible. What do I mean? Everything that I hear from people at work in the manager or human resources are telling me that they're drunk on the job. They're literally drinking alcohol out of a flask at their desk. They're habitually 2, 3, 4 hours late. They cursed out and with profanity and threats. I had one situation, somebody had threatened to go get their gun to shoot someone at the office. All the stuff that falls under the really severe and quite depressing area of sexual harassment, where someone is, oh my goodness, either physically assaulting someone sexually, which happens more than I even like to talk about. I mean, sometimes the world is not a super awesome place, and there are awful things that happen. I mean, a lot of the cases that end up in court when they're sexual harassment cases, people have been raped, sexually assaulted. I mean, it's not difficult to see that that's a crime, whether it's at work or out of work, and it definitely isn't appropriate for the workplace. And at the lower end of that spectrum, we have people who expose themselves. They're nude, and it's not part of their job. They grope other people. They have, just the whole litany of behavior that's not related to the job. It's not part of their job, and it's illegal, and it's unethical. Of course, the law is sort of your bare minimum, right? What you have to do. Ethics is that higher standard of what you should do. And when we focus in everything that we do on how do you surpass your goals, and we're almost always looking at things from more of a an ethical framework. And there's so many different types of ethical perspectives. But the bottom line is trying to make decisions and trying to do things where it's not the bare minimum, lowest level what's acceptable. That's the law. That's what the law tells you, right? It's more than that. It's better than that. So when we look at being HR manager and how do you deal with difficult people, well, it's easy. You just document whatever this is that you're calling difficult. That's just a nice euphemism, right? And it's a catch-all. And you document it. So you write, in your document, on Friday the 14th at 2:37 p.m. on the first floor in the conference hall, so-and-so, did such and such to another person, it's on camera, or there's 4 witnesses, they use the exact phrase, you're an idiot, I hope you die, whatever, you document this, and then you just kick in your progressive discipline, right? So if it's determined that it's not severe enough to go to the most intense consequence, and you might want to just have a verbal consultation, so that, verbal warning, and you talk to someone. Sometimes you'll do that, and people honestly didn't get it. They were just, shocked as anybody else. Oh, when I interrupt other people, oh, that's inappropriate? Yes, okay, it is. Oh, okay. And again, really specific. This is a whole nother program, but feedback must be specific. So you don't go to counsel someone and say, oh, sometimes you interrupt people and that's inappropriate. No, it's too vague, it's too broad. They won't get it. You have to do the same thing we just gave an example of. You have to say, oh, okay, last Friday, whatever date it was, in the conference room on the first floor, whatever time of day it was in the record, in front of these 4 witnesses, you said such and such. That was inappropriate because it is not conducive to, pull out your employee handbook or principles and policies and procedures. It was rude. It was not demonstrating respect. This is easy. But you have to be specific with them, because if you're not, they'll act like they don't understand what you're saying, and sometimes they really don't understand. Remember, they're doing this. right? They're rude, they're inappropriate, they're threatening people because that's what they want to do and they're allowed to do it. So obviously it didn't dawn on them not to do it, because if it had and they cared about keeping the job, they wouldn't have done it. So you have to be really explicit. But it's easy, again, for managers in HR because, hey, look, document, convey explicitly, and then you get the consequence. And the consequence has to be at a level where the person realizes, uh-oh, and then they stop doing the thing. If they stop doing it, then they're no longer, quote, difficult, problem solved. If they don't stop the behavior, that's their choice, then you just escalate the consequence until they are terminated from the relationship. You break up with them, you know. Doesn't mean they're not an awesome person. It just means that for whatever reason at this time, in this place, it just didn't work out because their behavior, as documented, was in violation of, it contravened what was the expected and communicated behavior. And then you just let them go their way. They're free, like a beautiful bird. They just fly out and find their joy. And it's not a joke. I mean, I've been in work situations, it just wasn't the right work, it wasn't the right time in my life, and things just didn't go well. It doesn't reflect on me as a person on the totality of my entire life on the planet. It just means that that's okay, we parted ways. And that needs to happen as quickly as possible. So if you're a manager in HR, you deal with difficult people because you document it, and then you get them out of there. So they either have changed their behavior, which has converted them to a non-difficult person, problem solved, or they're going to leave. Problem solved. The challenge is when I'm not able to do that. It's my boss who's the one that's difficult. It's my boss that's the one that's insulting and abusive. It's my boss the one that's harassing me. Okay. There's two parts of this I mentioned in the show notes when it's you and it's your boss, and you've got to be as honest as you can with yourself because this is all about you. This is your career, it's your job, it's your life, it's your stress level, it's your income level. It's all about you. Now, of course, I understand that many of us have other people, responsible that we're responsible for. So what we do does reverberate, but you have to start with you and end with you. So it's my boss. First of all, again, just do a quick assessment. Is your boss really difficult? Are they? If I asked you what makes them difficult or abusive, can you give me these concrete? I don't even like that term, but I just used it. Can you give me specific examples of the behavior that in your mind constitute them being difficult or abusive? So it needs to be the same thing we just went over. Okay, well, last Thursday, it was about 2:30, I was in the hallway on the third floor, I came out of the bathroom, and she was standing there, and she said, oh, looks like you had a rough night last night. Oh, my goodness. Were you out partying? It must be hard for you. It must be hard for you. You're getting old. Okay. That's behavior. That's specific. That I can understand. Saying that you're getting old and making derogatory comments about your appearance, implying that you're doing something inappropriate outside of work. I mean, here we go. That's specific. If you say something like, if I ask you what makes them difficult or abusive, and you start to tell me things like, well, a lot of times they just look at me and I really feel that they don't even care. And also a few times they asked Fran if she wanted to work on a project and they didn't even ask me. Okay, then no. That might not be what you would like ideally in your boss. It might not be that they have shown you that that you're number one fan in your career, that they're not abusive. You might not like them. They may not be somebody you want to hang out with after work, but they're not doing anything that's directly insulting you, abusing you, humiliating you, degrading you at all. Them assigning work projects and not maybe telling you why they assigned it to somebody else, that's not abusive. Now, they should maybe work to improve their management communication skills so that people understand ahead of time what are the criteria, how will people be selected. But that's not abusive or difficult. And this is important, and I know sometimes when we have these types of programs and I have community either speeches or we do classes, and we're going to start doing some more online classes so anyone can come and be part of these programs. People say to me, well, I don't know why you spend time defining, what's difficult or what's abuse. Because, I know what's abuse. The reason I do that is because it's not universally understood, and I've done so many aspects of these, this problem solving for so long. I sat in my law office and had people come in there claiming they needed to hire a lawyer for some big, huge, legal lawsuit and some violation, and then when you talk to them, it's the same kind of thing I just, referred to. Oh, well, they never liked me, and, sometimes when I'd ask him how I did, he'd say, fine. Okay, well, I understand that you're saying you didn't get the ideal amount of feedback you wanted, but that's not, again, abusive or difficult. You see the difference? You have to have specific actionable behaviors that manifest, not your suspicions. They have to be in real life. They have to have done something. And if it's just a work-related issue that you're unhappy with, how assignments are meted out or the way that they, speak, if they say your name and someone says, well, he always says, Courtney. That's just how he says it, Courtney. All right, well, that's not abuse. If he says, Courtney, you idiot, there we go. Do you see the difference? This is important, again, because I know there are people who just don't see this. So we move past people who just might have misunderstanding, might have unreasonable expectations, might have an inflated sense of ego or narcissism, thinking, well, why don't these people give me every assignment? I don't know. That's a different question. We're really talking about people who are doing abusive, unethical, illegal things. The boss is, dangerous. The boss has maybe undiagnosed mental health or psychological challenges. This happens. It's rare. Very rare, but it does happen. So the two questions that I'm going to ask once I've gotten past this sort of primary determination of, is there really something I can define, describe, document that other people would, understand and say, oh, yes, that does sound like that's inappropriate, or it might even be illegal. Okay. If you don't have that and it's just sort of this other, they look at me a certain way, or why do they seem like they like me, that's not difficult. So now that we know that we really do have a difficult situation, someone has said, they're in the office, they say things like, I just can't stand, women, who wear purple. I think they're the worst people in the world, and you're a woman and you wear purple. That's a problem. Okay. Now let's go to our pragmatic problem solving. The two questions in the show notes are that you're going to ask yourself, right? First, what do you want? And second, why do you want this? The first part of what do you want is really important. I mention this in so many programs. That why do people do what they do? Because they want to and because they're allowed to. Most of the time in life, I can't control what other people want. But I can, if I'm their boss, human resources or whatever, I can control what they're allowed to do. Or beyond that, in society, that's what government does, right? I can control that you're allowed to drive, 50 miles over the speed limit. I can give you consequences and make you stop doing it, or I can take your license away. So here we are, and we're asking this question from ourselves to the other side of it. If you're in a situation your boss is incredibly difficult, and you have consequences of that behavior that you're suffering, you go to work, your stomach hurts, you have headaches, you feel nauseous, you're breaking out in panic attacks. You think you're having a heart attack sometimes. You dread, the night before you have to get up the next day and go back to work. You're trying to figure out how, please let it snow or let a hurricane hit so I don't have to go. This could be a real problem. And you have the ability to, articulate. You've documented. I beg you to document, the lawyer in me, the consultant in me, these issues, and just jot little notes down, right? If you can at the time, it's great. If you have to wait till people go to the bathroom or break, then jot it down on your personal property, not the computer that the office gave you, not the tablet, that the office gave you. That's their property. Put it in your own little notepad, put it in your own little property that you own, because you might need that later. And that also will be able to help you have a check so you can look and see, are things happening that are really difficult or abusive, dangerous, or am I imagining things? Because we also we need that. So many of us don't want to believe that this horrible, difficult thing really is happening when it is happening. I've seen people just, rationalize all kinds of just awful behavior and tolerate it for way too long. But the first part is, what do you want? If your dream is to be, in this office, in this field, that you've gone to education or training, or you spent your whole life, you're a professional, athlete, and you spent your whole life, training since you were a child, to be able to do this job, and this is everything to you. It makes you happy. It's your passion. It's your joy. It's your creativity. There's nothing else you've ever done or wanted to do. It's the pinnacle of ecstasy when you have a great professional accomplishment. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what do I want? Now, on the other hand, if it's just sort of like, hey, I needed a job and these people hired me and this place is like close to my apartment, and you've been there, a few months, and this isn't your dream, it's just sort of a placeholder. It's just a way to get money. It's a way to, have something to do for right now. Then that's a totally different situation. If you just need, something to do that's a certain distance that you can get to on transportation, then there are other options. You don't particularly care about this company or this organization or this government agency. It's just sort of a thing to do. It's just, hey, it's just there. Then when you go to ask why you're doing this, why do you want this? If the reality is you really aren't invested in this job, it's just sort of something. And I have shared, in many programs that I've had the privilege and opportunity to learn how to take care of myself. And I've been doing it since I was in my late teens. And I've worked in all kinds of, fast food, and I worked at the mall and retail, minimum wage, and I've worked as a telemarketer, and I've done all kinds of things. It's all interesting. I can tell you the truth. I worked in computer manufacturing and all different types of things. I was a temp. I did a lot of jobs just because I needed money. That was the only reason I was there. I didn't really care about that fast food restaurant. I wasn't, desiring a career in pizza delivery or, putting together things on a circuit board. I was just doing it because I needed money, and they were convenient and close, and they were hiring. It was just a means to an end. In that type of situation, then I can go get another job pretty quickly, and I need to start doing that. I don't need to tolerate anything that's abusive from this boss because I don't need this. I just needed something right now, and I need to immediately start working on my skills. I need to find another alternative way to get transportation so I can work somewhere further away. I need to start working on my system stat. That means immediately, right? Because I don't need to stay here. I don't need this. It's just something I was just doing. It's not that important to me. I can go do this, whatever it is I'm doing, somewhere else, and not have a difficult boss. So that I need to start making my plan. Don't jump up and quit right now unless you know that you can go out and find another way to pay your bills. But you need to start making a plan and just start counting down in your head. I'm not staying. It's done. I'm out of here. If, on the other hand, this is your lifelong dream, you have some job, it's a very rare job, there are very few organizations in the world where you can do what you do, you're paid incredibly well, you have the joy of all the things that you get to do in your work are just wonderful, and the one part that drives you nuts is that you have this boss who's just, rude or behaves inappropriately at times. That's a different calculation. Okay, so why do you want this? If you want it, again, it's your lifelong dream. You're able to do what you love at an elite level. Then you're going to have a different answer to how you're going to handle this boss, because it's all about you. It's really about your long-term goal. And if you know that you can't probably do the skill that you're doing at the level you're doing it at many other organizations or any other organization right now, then you need to think big picture. Sometimes it's worth it. To sit and think, okay, look, I'm making an obscene amount of money. Let me look and see how long I need to save or invest in other opportunities so that I can come out of this situation when I leave in the best possible situation. And unless somebody's doing something that's illegal. Okay, so if they're physically assaulting you, if they're sexually assaulting you, if they're threatening you with violence, then they've crossed a line. How do you know? How do you know where the line is? It's the same line outside of work. Ask yourself, if somebody did this to me and they weren't my boss and I wasn't at work, would it be illegal? If I called 911, could I make a police report? Would the police say, oh, yeah, that's a crime? Somebody threatening to kill you, just randomly walking around, out at a mall, somebody, physically groping you. Yeah, these are all just regular crimes. You know this. You don't need a special training class to know this. Well, it's the same thing at work. If that's your situation, then you really need to document everything that happens, and you need to start preparing, if I were you, to take action when you're ready to assert your rights. So even though these are crimes, you can often report them to the police. You also need to understand that you have human resources and you have government agencies that will enforce your employment rights, and you need to be prepared to start building your case. But I wouldn't jump up and leave right now. In other words, don't become so short-sighted and so reactive that you destroy your career and your opportunities to do things for yourself because somebody is, they're, being difficult, abusive, and a lot of times they want you to leave, right? That's why they're doing and saying these horrible things. And it may be that the person who ends up leaving is going to be them because they've been violating the law. They've been doing things that the media knew, it would embarrass the organization. You might have a lot of leverage, but you need to be quiet, and you need to start listening and documenting everything. You need to think strategically. Don't react, think strategically. So this brings us to the end of this episode. Always come to CourtneyAnderson.com. I'm going to go ahead and do a follow-up episode so that we can go a little bit more in detail on how do you document. When does something become where a situation where it's intolerable. But thank you for joining me, and as always, come to CourtneyAnderson.com.